The turmoil on Wall Street and the WorldCom bankruptcy are just the latest. Ever since Enron, there has been worry in this country about the security of the money we put away for retirement. It's a shock to see people lose everything they'd worked for and not even know it. This spring, we reported another warning about our retirement funds, the spectacular collapse of an investment fund that wiped out the savings of more than 11,000 people. They were investors in the Baptist Foundation of Arizona. Many signed up after hearing a salesman's pitch in their own church. Baptist Foundation failed in 1999. Investors had $570 million in the fund. It is the largest bankruptcy of a nonprofit organization ever. Like Enron, Baptist Foundation concealed its losses, and like Enron and WorldCom, its financial reports were audited by the accounting firm Arthur Andersen. Today, many of the investors say they believe that the security of Baptist Foundation and the credibility of Arthur Andersen could be taken on faith. For how many of you did your investment represent all or most of your life savings?
That's all we had.
Ray Burns, Charlene Loy, Ernie Campbell, Frida Sanders, and Diana Francis are typical investors in Baptist Foundation of Arizona.
I had 250,000.
We have 90.
90,000.
86,000.
700,000.
$700,000.
Well, I had $35,000 at the point of bankruptcy. But
Thousands of investors lived on monthly checks from Baptist Foundation, the interest on their investments. Then, 3 years ago, the checks stopped coming.
Frida, when you got this letter that said they were broke, I mean, you must have thought, wait a minute, this was
Impossible, impossible. Because everyone said they'd been in business so long, they would no way, you know.
You'll understand her shock when you see Baptist Foundation's pitch.
Not one investor has ever lost a penny of their investment or the interest they earned.
But as the announcer spoke those words, Baptist Foundation was losing millions. The foundation had started back in the 1940s, paying a high rate of return and using some of the profits to build churches. But in the 1980s came new management. Under CEO Bill Krotz, shaking hands with the announcer, Baptist Foundation went completely, secretly broke. It was a series of bad real estate investments that ruined Baptist Foundation. But instead of admitting the losses, the foundation decided to hide them through fraud. Here's how it worked. Baptist Foundation sold its rotten real estate to a company called ALO. It moved the bad debts and the red ink off of the foundation's books and over to ALO. The trouble is, ALO was not really a separate company. It was created, financed, and controlled by Baptist Foundation itself. The real estate transactions were phony, just an accounting trick to make Baptist Foundation's books look good and erase the overwhelming debt. ALO was essentially a garbage dump for their bad investments.
A bad bank.
Arizona Attorney General Janet Napolitano indicted 8 foundation officers for fraud, including the CEO, Bill Krotz.
As they sucked more and more investors in, there was no reasonable likelihood that those investors would ever get any return on their money, and in fact, they lost all their money.
Charles and Wanda Phillips put their whole nest egg into the Baptist Foundation of Arizona, $120,000.
I felt that it was safer there than it would be in a bank or any other institution, because we thought we were dealing with Christians, you know, and a real Christian don't steal your money.
When the checks stopped coming, what did you say to Charles?
Well, I panicked. Man, I panicked terrible. I couldn't sleep at night or anything else because I didn't know what we was going to live on.
The Phillips had retired to a little dream house in Arizona, but now they're back at work. At 69, Charles is working in a grocery store.
What's going on, buddy?
Wanda, at 66, is in a chiropractor's office.
It's hard to be poor.
It's hard to be poor.
It's hard to be poor. Yeah, it really is.
How did BFA manage to convince the investors that it was running a clean operation, a healthy operation?
Every year they produced audits that said they were audited by a Big Five accounting firm. The audits were clean. Everything seemed hunky-dory.
Audits by Arthur Andersen.
Right.
And that, Attorney General Napolitano says, is all Baptist Foundation needed to make the scheme work: the legitimacy of an independent audit to reassure investors.
And in order to maintain our integrity in the marketplace, each year an independent audit is conducted by one of the leading accounting firms in the nation.
The state of Arizona sued Arthur Andersen, claiming that, like in the Enron case, the accounting firm overlooked serious trouble and issued clean audits year after year.
Is this incompetence or something much worse?
I would say, at a minimum, it's willful ignorance. You know, if you keep your eyes shut, you're not going to see very much.
But there were a number of warnings that Napolitano says should have been eye-openers for Andersen, starting with nothing less than a Baptist Foundation insider. Karen Pates was an accountant for the foundation, and more than 2 years before the bankruptcy, she had a crisis of conscience. In a deposition, she testified that she met with Andersen and explained the nature of Baptist Foundation's phony partner, ALO. And after Pates, the warnings just kept coming. A Texas Baptist group became suspicious, called Arthur Andersen, and said that they suspected the foundation was a fraud. Then a Phoenix newspaper ran a series of 13 articles that laid out the scheme in detail. Even Arthur Andersen's own internal documents described the foundation as, quote, a maximum risk client. But there was no hint of any of this in the public audit reports. Ed Novak represents Arthur Andersen. He is a lawyer defending Andersen in the Baptist Foundation suits.
There is no way in corporate America to insure against a well-orchestrated fraud. That's simply not what the ordinary audit is designed to detect.
And this was done in such a diabolically clever way that Arthur Andersen was no match and could not have figured it out.
Arthur Andersen could have figured this out if the people who were perpetrating the fraud and then decided to provide some information had provided full and complete information.
Novak says the warning from Foundation insider Karen Pates was just too vague to follow.
You know, Mr. Novak, I think many people would understand if one warning went unheeded, or two, but 3, 4, and 5, and those are fire alarms going off.
Mr. Pelley, all an auditor can do is what he or she is supposed to do with respect to each and every time an issue is raised in connection with the client. Collect the information, consider it, consult on it, reach a conclusion.
Andersen's conclusion was there was nothing wrong with Baptist Foundation's financial statements.
This was a fraud that was deep, it was thorough, it was long in duration, and it was not cracked by Arthur Andersen. It wouldn't have been cracked by any auditor.
But in fact, it was.
This was about literally accounting 101, auditing 101.
Dee Griebel says she figured out the fraud in an afternoon. She's a CPA and financial advisor in Phoenix. A worried investor asked her to have a look at the foundation's financial statements.
The assets versus the liabilities were almost equal. I went, whoa, there's no cushion here.
Griebel noticed that one of the foundation's biggest assets was a $50 million loan owed to it by none other than its phony partner, ALO.
What you knew at that point was that if the $50 million loan was no good,
you had a big problem.
BFA was broke.
Yes.
So she did something that Andersen never did. She turned to the State Corporation Commission for ALO's financial records, public documents that anyone can get.
I'll go to my grave remembering my emotional reaction. They had a negative net worth of about $106 million. And I went, whoa, I went and loaned these people a penny.
So what did she do with her discovery? She called Arthur Andersen. She called Andersen's Chicago headquarters and called the Phoenix office twice.
I made the message very blunt because I wanted to be sure to get their attention. You must withdraw your unqualified opinion immediately. The company's effectively broke. Call me.
Anderson never called back. From the first warning until the end, Anderson issued 2 more clean audit reports, and Baptist Foundation took in another $200 million from investors.
Arthur Anderson was the good deal. This was the safe bet, but it wasn't.
Is Anderson's conduct in this case negligence, willful complicity? How would you characterize it? There's no question that Anderson was wrong.
Anderson is just as sorry for what happened to the investors as everyone is. There are many parties to blame for this collapse.
Anderson's representative, Ed Novak, says Baptist Foundation's board should share the blame, the state of Arizona, and to some extent, the investors.
No investor should rely solely upon the fact that there is an audit. Investors need to do their homework. They need to be diligent. They need to be skeptical.
If I have to remain skeptical after looking at a clean Arthur Anderson audit, what's it for?
People need to understand that an audit is not a guarantee.
But Lynn Turner says an audit should stand for something. Turner was chief accountant at the Federal Securities and Exchange Commission. He says investors had every right to put all that they had into Baptist Foundation, given the audits.
If you'd gone into Baptist Foundation and the numbers were really true numbers and showed how lousy, then fine, you lose everything, okay? Got no sympathy for those people. But when the numbers look right and they made a decision based on that, okay, then it's a total cop out of the system for people to say it's partially their fault. That's baloney.
In a single day, the retirement they had saved for all of their lives was gone.
What was that change like for you?
Well, you just do without things. You have to go, your health insurance goes up all the time. It's a worrisome. I dropped my termite insurance. The bugs can have my house. I won't need it much longer.
I just too dumb to see it. We should have started checking more.
You know, you're awfully hard on yourself.
Well, I tell you, I need to be hard on myself.
What has it meant to you, Ray, since the checks stopped coming?
Well, I'll put it this way. We used to go to a store to shop and all for clothes and stuff. I go to Salvation Army now. It ain't right.
Since we first broadcast this report, Anderson has settled the Baptist Foundation lawsuits and paid $217 million. 2 of its auditors will surrender their licenses. The settlement means that investors will get about 42 cents on the dollar, and they may get as much as 2/3 of their investment back as the foundation's real estate is sold. With the recent bankruptcy of WorldCom, Anderson now has the distinction of having been the auditor at both the largest corporate bankruptcy and the largest bankruptcy of a nonprofit organization in U.S. history.